Before we talk about pair programming, let's quickly discuss what it actually is. By definition, pair programming is quite an old practice from extreme programming set of practices. And it essentially means that two people write code together on one machine. They both sit side by side at the same machine and they write the same piece of code. It used to be on the same machine. Nowadays, we are doing it remotely because people are from different countries and cities, and it just doesn't make sense to come to a single place to write code together. And we also have Slack calls and all that. But anyway, two people are writing the same code together, and one person is writing code, another person is watching. It's a very simple practice by definition, but obviously it has many pros and cons, and it has many wrong and right ways to execute it, which we will talk about today. I know there is an industry research about pair programming that shows that pairing produces better code in about the same time or even faster than if those two engineers would work separately. And I personally had a chance to confirm this research by my own experience. First, pair programming helped me to get into the new technical stack faster. Then it helped me to get into the new project context faster. And afterwards, it just helped both of us to deliver code faster and deliver it more stable, at least from my point of view. And my first experience was when I joined new project, and I was also quite new with Rails, so I had to learn a lot. And I think it would not be efficient at all if I would just be left alone by myself. I pass the mic to you guys, Arthur and Igor, to tell how did you get into pair programming? What was your first experience and first impression? So Arthur, let's start with you.
Thanks. So I guess that everyone does a bit of pair programming from now and then. We just call it a bit differently. Who hasn't helped a colleague to fix a bug or ask for help to fix a bug? But regular pair programming in like a bigger time frame, I guess, I started applying when I joined Railsware. And it was hard at first, I'll admit that, because I was, embarrassed and ashamed by lack of knowledge. So I wasn't just only new to the project, but I was also new to Google spreadsheets, and that onboarding heavily proved that. But after a few months, I was able to pick up those array formulas and other crazy things that we do in that project. So it helped to actually get on board much quicker and figure out how we do things and how to do them well. So I guess that my perspective changed to from being embarrassed by lack of knowledge and just doing things slowly to be more curious about where it will take us, because when you start a session together, you don't know what the end result will be, because it might exceed your expectations easily.
Do you have the same feeling of being embarrassed nowadays when you start working on something that you don't know?
Well, no, I guess that I've changed the perspective right now. I appreciate that I have someone to learn from more than I feel embarrassed about not knowing this myself. And so I guess that I became more open about not knowing things, which is important while pairing, because the other person might not know that you don't know something, and then it's good to ask questions if something is unclear. And I also use it to keep myself focused and motivated, because it's easier, to start a day when you know that there's another guy on the other end of the world waiting for you to start his day.
Oh, how definitely. About you? You have to be more strict about your schedule.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. How about you, Igor?
So I started pair programming early, when just in the beginning of my engineer career. just on my first job after graduating the university. We came to that company in a group of maybe 4, maybe 6 newcomers, and we all were split into the pairs and set to work on some tasks. It was a remarkable experience. Like everybody of us has definitely lacked some knowledge in the main area and some technical skills and experience. But from other side, everybody of us has quite a little different set of knowledge, and we could still learn from each other. And also we had great mentors in the company. Several people helped us, shared their knowledge, and we could learn from them. And I'm still grateful for such nice my career beginning.
Yeah, I guess, Igor, you are just not afraid to try something new, and it went well in your case. Yeah, I also need to mention that even though the pair programming approach is quite simple in its definition, there are still a set of rules on how you run your pair programming sessions. And I guess the most common one is driver to navigator approach. So when 2 people write the same code, they have roles. First person is a driver. It's a person at the keyboard who is actually writing code. And the driver is focused on his tiny task at hand, and he doesn't need to see the whole picture. And the important part here is that the driver should always talk through what he is doing, because if you just write code in pair and one person who is typing is keeping silent, it doesn't make much sense. And there is a second role, the navigator. That's the person who's not writing code. He's in observer position. He's observing and guiding the driver. So the navigator should have the bigger picture and have a better understanding on how this piece of code will fit into the whole project. At the same time, these roles rotate. And in my practice, it's very convenient to rotate on a daily basis. So one day you are writing code, another day your colleague is writing code, and then you switch every other day. I have not worked with other approaches and practices. We had it very straightforward in my experience. I would like to know your practices in the approach. So let's start with you, Igor.
Well, we tried different ones, like we adjust on the fly, and we don't have regular schedule for rotation. And obviously we do driver and navigator pair programming. But there is no strict rule. Like we can rotate quite often in 1 hour. We can do 10 times maybe. Like if I have some domain knowledge and I'm sharing it to other people, to other person, like I can take the keyboard just to explain it in writing the code and to do it more efficiently.
But you would not say that I will take the keyboard tomorrow and today you are the keyboard
no,
man, right?
I never say I will explain it tomorrow. So I just do it right away, and it works better. Like with the words, it's often difficult to explain that's what I mean. Like write a loop here and iterate there and much there. I just do some maybe pseudocoding. It's not the code which gonna work, but it helps me to explain the idea.
So you take the keyboard, write some pseudocode to explain the idea, and then you give the keyboard back.
Yeah, and you know,
in your case, screen sharing.
It's easy to do with modern software. It's easy to do. Actually, you have access to the code people on someone's machine, and you can edit it right away. And by taking the keyboard, I mean actually taking virtual keyboard, not physical one.
Yeah. Right.
Also, you mentioned that driver usually comments what he's working on. I would say it's not only drivers. There is continuous conversation between both of partners, and beware that silence is a dangerous sign of pair programming. It usually means something goes wrong. You should change something.
Yeah, I just noticed that when people are not get used to working in pair on the same task, they keep staying silent, because when you write code on your own, you don't need to talk about what you write, right? And it just becomes uncommon. But when you write code in pair, you cannot stay silent. Otherwise, your pair mate need to guess what you are thinking about or what will be next.
Yeah, that's true.
Arthur, how often do you switch pairs? Or not pairs, or switch roles?
I guess every break. So we usually, so we agree on the schedule, I guess, when we start a session. So we usually have some time frames in the calendar, and then when we start working together, we agree who will be the driver first, and then how we'll switch. And I usually rotate on breaks, which means that we make some work in progress commit. Usually, just push it to the branch that we're working on, and then the other person can pick it up.
So you have some kind of schedules that you agree in advance, right?
Yeah. So I set time aside in my calendar among other activities, so that we know that we'll be having each other in that time frame, and then within the time, let's say, of 3 hours, we can adjust like how we'll spend this time. So when we'll do breaks, how long they will be, and who'll be driving which part. And yeah, as Igor mentioned, it might happen that you're the navigator, but you want to explain something or show the other piece of code. So with Slack or Zoom, you can just grab the screen and share that part, explain it, show it, and then go back to the driver. And that usually is easier than explain idea using plain words.
Yeah, that's more flexible schedule, I would say. We used to have strict rules about switching who's the driver, who's the navigator. And when that happens and the navigator needs to explain his thought to driver, you start having two restrictions. First is you need to be very clear at explaining your thoughts, and you don't have any other way to like deliver your solution to your pair mate. And second, the driver should be very fast at navigating the files and get into the right line of code. So it will help you with your editor. But I know there are other styles that we've practiced. For example, I've heard about ping pong style of pair programming. It's an approach when one person writes a test and another person writes the implementation, and it corresponds with test-driven development way. Have you guys tried such thing?
Not that much. I just try, like, we both were writing test, like I was driver to write a test, and then my navigator became a driver to write an implementation. And that worked because I set proper expectation in test, and driver got to write proper implementation. But not exactly what you described. But I guess it just can work, and it depends on player, and you need to adjust.
Yeah, and it also, I guess, works well when you have a common practice of test-driven development and you do it a lot, so you can easily switch. Right. Yeah. Okay. So.
You guys in the chat, Vyacheslav saying it's ping pong style works great with TDD. And we got one question from Sergey. From the business perspective, have you ever measured the expenditure of pair programming?
I guess that's a very good question, and also a very complicated one to answer easily. First of all, it's sometimes hard to explain why two engineers are working on the same task together. So you need to have some level of trust between your team and external team if you proceed with pair programming. But as for the measuring itself, I don't remember such experiments when we did more or less similar tasks in pair and not in pair. But we did measures with the team velocity, like you do estimations on your tasks and then you have a velocity at the end of your sprint and you see whether you fit to it or not. And we did constantly fit to the velocity and even were a bit ahead when we worked in pair. And then once we stopped working in pair and the team got a bit bigger, we started having issues with that. I suspect that happened because while working in pair on same task, you are constantly on the same page. So you reduce the time spent on discussing anything you just discuss on the go. And you also do QA together because you write tests and then you validate things together. And you don't spend time on that. But I guess I'd be also interested to do more of more detailed estimation or performance measurement.
I guess I also have some good example from business perspective. And first of all, for business, there are several things matters, like quality of code delivered and the time you need to deliver something. And as of quality, everybody does PRs review. Well, if you don't do PRs review, probably you should start doing PRs review. And usually in PRs review process, you receive some feedback from your teammates. But imagine that you receive this feedback immediately. In time, you are doing coding and you are adjusting on the fly. So, like, first of all, it saves time. And as two people pays attention to same code, and it improves quality of the code delivered. So business benefits from pair programming much, I would say.
Yeah, I would add to that it might be hard to measure over a shorter period of time because the main benefit of pair programming is that you produce better code together. And that eventually leads to the code base, which is easier to maintain for longer than if it was done by individuals. At least that's what we've seen on our own products. That it's easier to make those architectural decisions, especially early on, that are better, and the project can grow more steadily, and we don't lose pace. And I had a recent example where we were not pairing with one other teammate working on the same part of the product, which was Zapier-like flow to set up things. And we were having constant bugs with that, even though we had tests and everything, there were still some bugs. And eventually what helped us was to do 2 sprints in pair. And then we first aligned our technical visions on how it should work, eliminated all the bugs and stabilized the code. So that helped to work together just for 1 month. And we managed to deliver this flow to production and had very little bugs afterwards. But like looking sprint to sprint, where you have, let's say, a team of 4 people working individually on different parts, and then you have 2 pairs working on 2 different things, then the benefits might not be that obvious from the time perspective. That's true.
Another example of time saving from my side could be that recently, maybe not recently, a few months ago, we did pair session with my partner. And at the beginning, he was new to pair programming. And at the beginning, I asked about his attitude to pair programming. And the task was actually defined at some high level. Then when working together, we switched to completely different architecture, which the person, if he worked alone, he didn't do that way. He just continued with what was defined before. And obviously, at some point of time, we would rework that solution to something more performant. And the time of the price of mistake grows with the time, and that was the case where we caught mistake early and adjust early. So probably by 3 hours of pair programming, we saved maybe a few days of refactoring. Mm-hmm. And after that case, the guy completely changed his mind about pair programming, and I guess now he uses it in his engineering.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I would not want to promote pair programming as a silver bullet for everything. There are definitely situations when it's better to split. For example, if you have super obvious tasks that can be done in parallel and you are sure that they will stay obvious once you start doing them as well. But we'd like to discuss pros and cons later. There are definitely cons together with pros. So let's discuss them later. Right now, I would also want to talk about situations where you can use pair programming. Because the job of an engineer is not just writing code. You also spend time on planning your work, discussing your work, debugging, writing tests, QA, validating requirements. There's lots of things on which you spend your workday. In my experience, we practiced pairing on almost all of them. So we did go through the requirements, we did communication with product managers, communications with designers, then writing tests, doing QA, and writing code together. I would like you guys to speak about approaches you use, and especially situations where to use pair programming, and when it makes sense to split, and when it's helpful to actually pair on something. Arthur, let's start with you and your forest background.
I don't bring people to the forest. However, I do usually start onboarding from working more in pair, and that makes it easier to get new people acquainted with both the architecture and the product, as well as requirements, so that we start from usually product discovery, then we do some implementation planning, and then we write code, and then we review. And that has also the benefit of showing how the team is working. So introducing new person, the new person that gets introduced to the team will also have the hands-on experience of the entire workflow, like where we grab scope from, how we look at requirements, how we ask questions, where we ask questions, when we ask questions. And then we look into the code itself. And usually we do it and the long-term member as a navigator or as a driver. That depends, but I guess mostly as a driver. So the newcomer has the observer perspective, and then I guess he's not expected to tell what to do and have the bigger picture, but the driver kind of combines both roles, explaining how things work and what we need to change and where.
And you work with a lot of newcomers, right? So a lot of new people on the project, and you need to explain them the context and the technology behind the project, right?
Yes, that's true.
Mm-hmm. And when that happens, a newcomer, is he mostly in the navigator role?
I guess personally, I try to avoid it at first, especially with the first story, because the first story is kind of crucial to get things up and running. So we use it to set up the machine together, and this is the part where the newcomer is actually driving. But other than that, the onboarder is driving, because it's just faster and more productive to go through all those places. And then once the newcomer gets more acquainted with the code base, where to look for things, then it's easier to start navigating.
Interesting. So even while the person is new, he or she will still spend a lot of time in navigating and not directly writing code by driving, right?
Yes.
I guess I also have a good example of newcomer being navigator. And it's not the first task, but maybe in a week or in 2 weeks, newcomers can do that. And it happened for me. Like when you do pair programming a lot, and in general, in pair programming, there is such term as pair pressure. It's when people work in pair, they usually tend to concentrate on what they're working on. So when you work, you go to do not disturb mode. You turn off notification, you turn off phone, and you just do what you should do. And it happened for me. Like I took in pair the person and I just did the job. I didn't have any distraction factors, and I was driving and I was explaining what I'm doing. Like I had some high-level plan in my mind. Maybe it was not that complex for me. It was clear, but I could do that. And it was beneficial for me to do the thing quickly, according to the process in the team. And it was beneficial for the partner because the partner was curious, and if there was unclears, he also could ask, and I could explain right away.
And Igor, do you use pair programming when you actually need to review scope or task, like not write code, but to review some of the requirements?
Yes, we do. Actually, I had fun example. Like we had a feature, and I was responsible for the feature, and we also had a newcomer. We were doing that with a newcomer, and then we were reviewing some mock-ups, some high-level description, and I was just talking. I was talking, reviewing some edge cases. What if we do here, there, here? What if we do this here and that there? Raising some question. I just was thinking loudly. And I couldn't even imagine that the partner was taking notes. And it was complete surprise for me in the end of the session that he shares the document with me and says, here is what we have.
I guess not everyone is as diligent as that guy. Probably next time you should warn in advance that I will be talking for half an hour and you should take notes.
Was it, by the way, manually written or was it auto transcription?
I guess the person is one of the best typists in the company, so he could type with the speed of speaking. And then actually we had a plan. We maybe corrected this a little and when sent it right to PMs and got answers. So here how it works.
Are there any interesting non-coding tasks that you did in pair recently?
Well, I rarely, I guess I never pair on reviewing pull requests, or very rarely.
Oh, really?
So this is the part which we do, I guess, separately. And I guess answering one of the questions there was in the meantime was about how much time do you guys spend per day, and how to do it.
We'll get to this question a bit later. It's actually a bigger separate topic about time spent. And I want to first discuss the activities you spend pair programming on.
All right.
Because reviewing code is also a nice example. We've tried to pair on code review, and it may work good because code review is more or less the same as writing code, right? You need to, when you write code, you also need to read code. Like you need to read code nearby and you need to understand what you write. And it's more or less the same with code review. So when you do it in pair, you're just more effective. Your pair mate can point you at some problems in the code that you may not notice, and you will write comments faster, and you will like provide more valuable code review. And it helps well when your team, obviously, when your team is bigger than 2 people, right? So you don't review code of each other. You just review code of other team members. So it also works when you have a team of 3 or 4 and more folks. But I would not say it's a must to do. Just
okay.
The question in our chat: how does pair work works in team of 3 people? Actually, is it efficiently, or how many people can be there?
Well, not more than 2, I guess, but you can rotate and switch.
Okay, so maybe if you have several newcomers, like you have some domain knowledge and you want to share it to several people, then it could work. Like you have a ticket, take something simple, and you have 2 people, for example, who want to gather context. And do implementation planning, all 3 of you, and do detail implementation planning. This worked for us, actually. We did plan, and then, well, every step is defined. It's left to implement the steps. Now 2 people have context. They can work together in pair. And then you can split. You can go and leave the pair of 2 to actually implement the plan.
Or another.
Sorry again.
What if there are 3 people?
So I was third. I explained and then left.
Dropping the bomb with context. Yeah, I guess a different approach could be that one person, I guess, having the most context is pairing for half a day, or let's say 3 hours with one person and then with the other person. And actually time zone differences help. I had this case when I had one onboardee from Brazil and the other one from Russia, I guess, or from Kazakhstan. And I was spending morning with one person and then evening with another person. And for both of them, it was actually their morning or the first half of the day. So they were productive and it worked well.
Well, you're happy one. My Brazilian onboardees, it didn't work because they usually start before me.
Well,
yeah, it was quite.
And then you spend like half a day in pair, right?
Well, actually, we probably can spend all the day with them. They start early and almost have one-to-one match to my schedule. But the issue is that I have to do different activities and have to balance between different people, different contexts, different activities in company. So it always works according to my schedule, like actually Arthur mentioned in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I was more lucky. I was more pairing with guys from Ukraine and Russia, well, mainly my time zone. So I did not have that flexibility of doing something alone for half of the day and then pairing for another half of the day. And with that in mind, I think it would be good to discuss how much time do you spend together in pair and how much time do you spend separately, like how often pair programming sessions should take place. Because it's clear that you can you can do any type of tasks in pair. You can write code, you can review code, review requirements, communicate, you can do all of that in pair. So in theory, you can do 8 hours a day in pair, right? Basically do everything with your pairmate. But personally, I know that pairing for a full day can be a super intense and exhausting experience, and you got super tired at the end of the day, like really tired, cannot think about anything. Just go outside and do nothing after that, and it gets time. It gets better over time, but you need time to get into this intense mode of pairing for a full day. And I would not recommend that to everyone. It's more personal. For some of the folks, it makes sense and they will benefit from pairing more. But more often, you get enough pair programming benefits from pairing half a day or like 4 hours a day or something like that. What do you guys think? How often of pairing sessions would you recommend? Arthur, want to hear something from you first?
All right. So I don't do more than 2 3-hour long sessions a day. And these days are exhaustive. Yes, they are exhaustive, but actually they are also kind of nice because the pair work kind of forces you to be focused throughout the entire time. So at the end of the day, I have a feeling that I did more than I would otherwise do just on my own. But having single session longer than 3 hours, I guess it would be too much for me. So I just do one before lunch, one after lunch, and have like 15 minutes break in within this 3-hour long block, and that works well. But usually I have one such session per day, not 2. Igor?
All right.
Yeah, pretty similar. But first of all, I would like to highlight that the important thing is agreement, and you both should agree on something you're comfortable with. And then, in my personal experience, I usually schedule in advance sessions. Well, depending on player type, like with newcomers, I do it maybe 2 to 3 hours a day. Depending on my other activities, it's between 1 to 3 hours each session. And then with such a schedule, you can do it twice a day. So often we can do twice a day, for example, for 2 hours and 4 hours in total, or even more. It happened for me to do more, but I would agree with Arthur T that it's exhaustive. And usually, as I have to do some other activities, I'm not just able to do more pair programming. But it could happen that first half of day you do pair programming with one person and another half of day with different person. And also this works with newcomers. And the different thing is when you need some advice from your teammates who are not newcomers, who are already experts and have some more domain knowledge in some area. And then in such cases, usually I know the topic, I inform people in advance, and maybe 1 hour is enough. So particular example of such thing could be that I ping teammate just to debug the query, database query. And 1 hour is enough.
Mm-hmm. And is it hard for newcomers to even spend a couple hours in pair together? Do they get tired in the first days?
Well, getting to new context is difficult, but anyway, people learn, and it works better than if people work alone.
Well, yeah, definitely. I think when you work alone, you have lots of distractions while you work. You have Slack messages, you have someone outside, or even opening a second browser tab and reading something different, you have lots of those tiny distractions during your day. When you pair, you cannot afford that. So you work for 50 minutes, you have a 10-minute break, but you have an intense period of time for work and you don't do any distractions. Maybe that is the reason why people get tired after longer pairing sessions. Yeah. How is it for you, Arthur? Are all newcomers happy with more of pair programming in their life?
That depends. But usually they appreciate when they are shown the shortcuts in the documentation, because over time there might be too much documentation and it's hard to read and remember all of that. So they particularly appreciate if you can go through the documentation with them and tell them like summaries of the most important things. So actually from that perspective, pair work is beneficial because you can show the shortest path leading to the goal that you want them to achieve. So they enjoy this more than just reading or watching some materials that were prepared before.
It's also fun to watch how people change their mind about pair programming. And usually it happens for more senior experts in some technical areas. And it happened for me several times. People change their mind and actually began to think that it works great. I wish to pair more. But initially they were kind of reluctant to pair programming.
Yeah, I often see that people just want to have the experience of digging through the code on their own so they can understand it. And I usually give them that space. So kind of I can do other activities while they can get acquainted with the code base at their own pace and the way they prefer to do it. So I guess it's a mutual benefit of not pairing for the full time. And then they feel more comfortable at some point and more confident with the code base after they go through it on their own. However, in case of complex flows or certain things, it might be better to do the initial investigation together just to explain those parts and just leave the keywords in place so that the person can find them later and go through that once more.
Usually my advice in such cases when I leave people alone, to debug something or to just learn code base, if you got blocked, don't be blocked for a long time. If you can't unblock yourself, then maybe in 10 or maybe in 15 minutes, define some time. And after this time, just ping people and ask for help. So, and it works.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So, good thing to look for is if you remain productive or not anymore. If not, then ping your team.
Definitely.
And it's useful to ask questions and ping people in shared channels rather than in direct messages, because the person that you are hoping to get help from might not be available, but others might help instead. Or might know some other pieces that are related to that.
All right, I see we got lots of questions here in the chat. So before we switch to another topic, so proceed, maybe we can stop on the questions part. Nastya, can we go through the top ones?
Well, it's a lot of comments. I was reading some of them. If starting from the bottom, Stanislav is asking about what happens if the code is not finished, the task is not finished during one pair programming session. and what happens afterwards? Like one person continues working and another person starts doing something else, and how it goes if maybe someone new joins the team and you have to explain to him once more everything.
Mm-hmm. Arthur, you were answering something similar. I guess you would be the best person for this question.
Yeah, I can take that one. So that's a very good question, first of all, and it happens often. The situation, because it's kind of hard to synchronize the schedule so that you will finish during the session. Ideally, that would be the case, but it's hard to split task in such a granular way. And if it cannot be split, then usually, yes, one person will drive it further, and then next time both of you will have empty space in your calendar. Then you will synchronize on the changes that were made and proceed together further. Yeah, I wouldn't, I guess, advise to start another task in the meantime for both of you when you can work together, and then go back to the one that you did work together on. I guess that it's better for one person to just continue with that one, and then only one person will have to kind of refresh the context. So that's how I usually do it.
And it's not a common situation when you have a team of more than two people and you constantly switch pairs, right? So it's kind of a separate process how to switch pair mates every other day. When you work with the same person every day, then you can make stops or breaks same way you would do it yourself. Just commit something and push, and then proceed from the same place, right?
Okay, probably I also have an advice here. Like if you don't have some such synchronous schedule with your partner and you should leave early, probably you can predict that you won't finish in time. And in this case, I would suggest to do some planning for further actions. And like everything can happen. You can do some other activities. You can go to vacation. You can do like short vacation, like 1 day vacation or so on. And in this case, before leaving, make sure person has some action items to do. Like it's clear what to do next and how to do next. And this is what we do often. And this is how usually I left people alone.
Great, thanks, Igor.
If a company does not practice pair programming, how can Sergey find partners to do pair programming regularly?
If you have another engineer in your team, you can ask him to join you for one specific task, and you will do the pairing. Then you can ask again to join for another task for a couple hours, and you will do another session of pairing. And then you guys both enjoy it, and you'll start having pair programming regularly. It's not like you need to convince your boss or something like that. You just start doing it, and you still deliver a stable code in time. So that's it.
I think that go ahead.
Sorry. In 2 or 3 weeks, share your experience with your manager, and if the process in the company goes good, and you share all the benefits from your experience of pair programming, you will be approved to do it more.
And I mean, it may also go from another side. If you will go to some kind of a manager or a boss or whoever and say that, hey, we want to work in pair from now on, and we will do same tasks in pairs. Most probably your manager would not be happy, especially if he is not tech savvy and doesn't understand all of the details of engineering and how it's done. But if you will go from another side and will actually start doing things in pair for a couple hours a day, and there will be a notable difference in speed, in stability, and in knowledge sharing in the team, then you don't even need to convince anyone to do the pair pair programming, right? You've already increased the velocity, you've already increased the stability, and it's up to you which process do you use for that.
I think that the easiest and most intuitive thing to start with is to plan the implementation for bigger or more complex epics, because this naturally feels like something that might require two people to collaborate upon. So it might be a good starting point just to pick a big epic, try to break it into smaller pieces together, and then figure out how the implementation might look like. Then most likely you'll see some uncertainty that you haven't predicted before, and that will already prove valuable. And then just try to increase the time spent, I guess, together. So starting step by step, I would say.
And another easy way to get into pair programming would be to join a company that's using pair programming. It's the most easiest way, I guess.
Are you using any specific service or tools for doing pair programming? Are there any?
I guess guys will be the best to answer this question. From my point of view, I can quickly mention that we also do pair programming during interviews with engineering candidates who are going through interview process in our company. We actually spend the full working day together, working on some real tasks, and we work in pair during that time. So for that, we use the Visual Studio Live Share plugin, which allows you to basically write code together by sharing parts of the code without sharing the whole repository access. But in a day-to-day work, it's different. There are a set of different tools. So Artur, what would be your recommendation?
Do you know Duckly.com?
Yeah, I went to the website to check it out. I haven't heard about them before. Seems nice. What we use, as Artur mentioned, during hiring process, we do use Visual Studio Code with file sharing. Igor might tell more about RubyMine and Code with Me. I generally prefer to stick to Slack call, or if my internet provider struggles that day, then I switch to Zoom because it seems to be more network efficient, I would say. And that's it. So simply I use Git to push the changes, and then just Slack call, and then anyone can use whatever the editor plugins, key bindings is used to. So it doesn't require to change the preferences of everyone to just pick one tool.
Mm-hmm. Igor?
And it depends on your preference. Like I use both VS Code. These people who more like VS Code, and for people who use RubyMine, and RubyMine is my preference, we use Code with Me plugin, and it also works. But always we do Slack call and we share the screen. So I can highlight something both in the screen, just drawing, and using plugin live code.
Yeah, and there's another approach when you don't need to actually share your screen. Let's say you're just working on some part of a business logic, and you don't need your browser to validate it. So you can just validate your code with tests, and you can do everything in terminal, and you can use something like Vim or any other terminal editor. Then you can go with a simpler way, especially if you don't have a stable connection. And they shared one link that allows you to quickly share your terminal sessions through Tmax. And there's also a comment about Vim and Tmax. So it's just another way to do pair programming without sharing screen. But yeah, there are plenty of different approaches. So whichever works for you and your pair mate, you just need to hear each other, and you need to be able to type the same code together and have an easy way of switching the typing role. All right. I guess let's proceed to additional topics. We still have much of interesting things to cover, and make another break for questions afterwards. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about pairing with newcomers, and that's definitely makes sense because a new guy in the project doesn't have much context, and pairing is a easy way to transition the context, the technical knowledge, the project context, and all of that. So it is definitely increasing the onboarding time. But there are also different types of pair programming. I mean, different people to program. You don't need to limit yourself to pairing between just an expert on the project and the newcomer. I know there are cases when two seasoned engineers on the project can pair together, as well as two newcomers can pair together. And the benefits are different in such cases. Arthur, please share your experience about pairing with someone who has experience on the project as you are.
Well, it's always nice. And I think that it's less exhaustive than just, passing the knowledge and about the project when someone joins. So it's more like feeling empowered rather than trying to convey the approaches and the context. The case that I mentioned, right, with the Zapier-like flow, which we worked together, and it was very nice experience because I finally had a chance to learn some CSS and how to do it right. While we both stayed productive, so we came from different perspectives really on how to do front end, and it was for me very, very useful to learn how to structure CSS so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel each time I change something tiny, how to make those reusable components, and eventually we ended up having nice component library, which we didn't have before. So that was very, very interesting experience. And from the other point, we kind of had to agree on the vision, how we'll do, in that case, form validations, and we had very different perspectives. So it was interesting to disagree with someone on this, because then we both had to dig deeper to understand the pros and cons of both solutions. So that was also very, very informative and very nice learning experience. However, it came at the cost of need to manage the disagreement, which is not always that easy and straightforward. So usually, from what I've seen, the seasoned developers might have their ways of doing things, and as with human beings in every habit, it might be harder to change than with people having less experience, and it might be a good habit and might be a bad habit. So it requires a bit of work and respect to align on those when you disagree with someone. But other than that, very nice experience. However, there is one caveat: if someone asks you for a 5-minute call, you might end up having 2 hours spent together.
Yeah, the well-known "do you have 5 minutes" phrase.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, having an agreement is an important part. Like when you work with someone more or less the same experience as you are, you both need to get the agreement quickly and not argue about small details. So it's also goes about characters and personality, which is also important. Yeah, Igor, what's from your experience of pairing, not just with newcomers?
Well, I like it more than other types, because usually, like Arthur already said, I also learned a lot. And usually in such case, I feel less experienced than partner I request help from. And yeah, I learned a lot from such people, from such players, and we have a team of great people, and there are people who experts in slightly different area, and you benefit working in pair with everybody. Like I can remember learning some database stuff, some deep knowledge, some architecture thing in Amazon, some Terraform things, and so on and so on. I have lots of examples. So yeah, I like pair, and I learn a lot from them. And I agree. There might be cases. Also, it could be with newcomers too, but usually it's not the case with newcomers. But you might have disagreements, and usually the approach is to manage, not to waste time on disagreements. Like if there is no convention, like team convention, or I'm okay with other person opinion. If I'm not okay and other person won't agree, usually we spend some time discussing this, and then if we still disagree, we postpone this, meaning postpone this smaller exact solution to some. We do something, and then we ask the team, what is the team preference? Because as we all team members, I guess it matters more. You should just adjust to what team prefers.
So you guys do some kind of democracy voting when you have a disagreement?
Yeah, we do. Like recent case could be for numeric Ruby parameters. This new style. I was introduced. I saw that in like my partner was doing that, and from the first look, it seems to be awkward for me. I disagreed with that, but person like, and I didn't have strong opinion and strong arguments to prove what is the best. So we just did what was the most simplest, and then we asked the team what the team thinks about such approach. And actually, after the discussion, we could figure out where we can use and where we cannot use. And actually, in such case, we both adjusted. I gave up a little my opinion and had to adjust my style. And the other guy adjusted his way of doing the things.
Right. Well, the democracy works. But you still need to have a team of more than 2 people, right? Otherwise, your votes will divide equally.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in every team there should be mutual respect, and if you respect everybody else, maybe everybody should give up a little, and then overall goal should be the progress.
Yeah, sure. I also worked with newcomers and with more seasoned colleagues. It's great to work with both. It might be better for me personally to work with someone more seasoned, just because I will have lots of things to learn from. And for me, it was some tiny details like new hotkeys in the IDE, or new details about how you do index in database. Some tiny details that do not matter that much for the project, but can give either you or the project a nice performance boost. And you basically transition the knowledge from other person's head to your head. And that's a really great experience, I would say.
Yeah, to fill in the knowledge gaps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of become a single head after some time spent in pairing together. All right. I also want to discuss one important topic in regards to pair programming, and the topic that prevents some teams to actually start using it, and that would be the project deadlines. I guess every project has some kind of deadlines. Some are more strict, some are less, but you typically have them. And when you have deadlines, you have exact scope to implement in that deadline. Now, when you think about pair programming, you think that it will become twice slower because instead of doing something in parallel, you just do it together, right? And sometimes it's hard to convince your teammates or your management, your client, whoever, to start this new approach of doing things in pair. So how did you do it? How did you work in pair under hard deadline pressure? And which approaches did you use? Igor, let's start with you for this question.
Okay. So as for deadlines, it depends on complexity things you're going to deliver, and nobody wants to fail, right? So if things are too complex, there are high risks that you at some point you can go wrong path and waste the time. So if you're not approved to spend time together, but nobody can disallow you to do things. So at least do some planning together. So as more complex scope is, do it more often. And do planning. Elaborate on some parts, write details, up to maybe specific lines to code and some notes what to change where, and then in the end you will have a set of some simple action items, and this is a point where you can split and everybody can do his job separately, and then again do it regularly. Elaborate on action items, do it separately, then come back and do together. But if you feel like it's too complex stuff, like good example maybe is billing. If you have
billing is always complex and
yes, and you don't want to fail, and the risk of the fail is too high because you can accidentally charge someone wrong. And you don't want to do that. So this particular example is great example of where you want to do it in pair. And then you see some complex things and do it together. That's the rule.
Yeah. What if you have more of simple tasks? Sorry, Arthur. What if you have lots of simple tasks to deliver before the deadline? Let's say you have 3 weeks before some release and you have lots of bugs or small changes that needs to be done before release. Would you rather split or still proceed doing that in pair?
Well, it might be reasonable to do both. Like, of course, we should spend some time at the beginning to just go through those bugs and elaborate on fixes and elaborate on complexity. Once that's done, it's completely clear what is complex and what is not complex. And then we can separate if we see that it's simple enough, and it could be just, for example, wording fixes or some color fixes or some position fixes or some maybe minor logic fixes. Those are good examples to separate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree with that. Arthur, and I interrupted you on some very important thought you had.
Very important. I wanted to just add that I would put the most stress and sync on the parts that are interconnected with one another. So if there are two tasks, let's say, and they have some joint part, like let's imagine that we have, it's a super artificial case, but let's imagine that we have two tasks, one for API, so backend changes, and the other one for the UI, so front-end changes. So obvious synchronization point could be about the contract between the front-end and the backend. So those are the things that can be agreed upfront, and then I guess that people can work on them independently. But ideally, they would just be done in a sequence. So if that's the case, then there are tasks that cannot be parallelized, right? If one depends on another. So it might make sense to pair on those, just to get those that are blockers or dependencies of other out of the way as quickly as possible. And then you can split and work on the other parts that are not depending on one another. Something like that.
Yeah, makes sense.
Guys, are there any, I mean the audience, are there any questions you want to ask? Because there are 15 minutes left. We can still answer your questions just to be in time. I don't see any at the moment in our chat, the new ones. And while you are thinking on your questions, I might ask my question. I bet there are cases when engineers just don't match for some reason. And how to cope with that? Can anyone predict that? And what to do? What are the tips?
It's not like you're selecting your next wife or something like that. So you don't need to have a perfect match. But, well, as long as you're a grown-up and adequate person, you probably can find a common language with more or less anyone. It may be hard to work in pair with some people because every person is different, every characters are different, and every person has his own way of expressing thoughts. But I guess from my experience, the more people you pair with, easier it becomes to find common language with any new person. What do you guys think? Okay, Igor.
Okay, sorry, Arthur. So first of all, there should be mutual respect, and if there is respectful atmosphere in the team, there might be minor problems, but usually we can manage to solve them. And that's it. Pair programming works almost everywhere. Arthur?
Yeah, I would say that it might amplify the other problems that might go unnoticed for some time without pairing. So, for example, if there are two strong characters that prefer to do things or prefer things to be done their way, and they disagree with one another, and that might eventually destroy the entire team from inside out. But that might take more time than if they work together in pair and had those disagreements on regular basis, because then the friction would be obvious. And
sorry, go on.
Yeah, and there is a question like if those are like personal issues that can be resolved, or there are other issues, because sometimes it might just help to switch the project and continue working because it depends on the source of those issues.
Yeah, even when you can find a common language with most of the teammates, well, you should find a common language with most of the teammates. Sometimes it's still pretty hard to do that. So I think those problems should be addressed during hiring stages. Like you need to see who will join your team, during interviews, and work with person before he joins your team on the interview. And a newcomer should also work with your team on the interview before he joins the company, so that he or she will see how it is from inside. I guess it's those are the reasons why we run pair programming on interviews, in fact. And we are able to work with a newcomer before he becomes part of the company, and we are able to see if we will be able to find a common language or not.
Good coffee and donuts should help, guys in the chat say, in the pair programming. Okay, and another question we have in the chat: who should do the code review? If one of the partners or another person, the third one?
Yeah, that does make sense to do the code review if you just work together and there's no one else.
Well, at this point, working together, you already reviewed this. Like I didn't, maybe I do not review that thoroughly as I do for REST PRs. Maybe just quick glance on PR, but usually it's very quick.
Sounds like it's like another benefit of pair programming. Like if you're doing, two of you doing it, no one else have to approve it, I mean, review it.
Like your partner already addressed your comments on the fly in the moment of coding.
So if you just team of 2 engineers, you don't need to spend time on code review, right? And if you also do all the coding in pair.
Yep.
Okay. Well, maybe you can split for half of the day, and then you would need to review only separate commits instead of
That's true.
reviewing the whole part of code. Okay. All right. So our event is approaching to an end, and we talked a lot of good parts about pair programming. And like I said, it's not a silver bullet. There are definitely some cons to it. So I would like to go through the list of some of the pros and cons of this approach, and to have a better guidance on when to use it. From my point of view, I can share one downside that was obvious for me personally. Is that you are getting tired, you're getting exhausted after your work day, and it takes time for you to become convenient with this approach. If you haven't tried it before, you would need to spend a couple of months so that you will become convenient with pairing with someone. And that comes from the stress, from personal stress, because you are showing your colleagues that you don't know something. For some people, it's not that easy to show others that you don't know something. So you need to be open to showing your weaknesses, let's say, and open to learn new things. So it gets better with time, but still the entry level might be higher, and it was a bit of a downside for me. Artur, Igor, can you share a couple points of goods and downsides for the pair programming that you've noticed?
Right. I can start. So good is that you have instant feedback. So it's very easy to validate the ideas for the implementation or some architectural decisions right away. It's also easier to not to get stuck. So in cases there are some weird issues that you cannot debug or they might be hard to debug, then having another person on the line helps to be more creative in tackling those issues. Time spent on reviews is a good benefit, I would say. I also do review less thoroughly if I know that the pair worked on a pull request. If I was requested to review, if not, then all good. I guess even better. As for downsides, it requires more communication. So this requires practice to be more comfortable with it, because you speak more. So usually we could just spend days writing code and not talking to anyone. So it just requires to talk more, and it might be exhaustive, but glass of water or two helps. So that's the trick. Agreeing on breaks also requires some bit of management, right? And seeing upfront what might happen. It's fine when you, for example, get a delivery and you have to pick it up. It's totally fine to leave your permit for a couple of minutes, but like other longer breaks require some communication and agreement. And I guess also planning is the main overhead, I would say, because you need to figure out what your schedule will be exactly when you'll start to work with another person and what you'll be working on, rather than just start your working day and figure out on the go. And this agreement, this is the part that was the hardest for me personally, to manage when we are in kind of impasse where we both disagree and we cannot find a way out. And actually the trick that Igor mentioned, to just ask the team for their opinion, helps.
So democracy.
Democracy wins. That's it, Igor.
Well, you almost didn't leave me something to add, but anyway, I will add. First of all, it's learning. I like that I learn from my peers, and it doesn't matter actually on partner expertise. Like I could learn just by explaining something to somebody. For example, these English speakers, I practice my English better, practice more, and it becomes better. So I still learn. Come on, guys. Recently was lockdown. How about socializing? Like, it's obvious benefit is for me. Like, sitting at home in front of your laptop, you still talk to people from different part of worlds. Like, I learned how people in Brazil live, for example, Argentina, Poland, Russia, and so on and so on. So be curious, know people, and it's fun. Always talk to people. As for cons, there is one thing, it's negotiation. I agree. And from one side, it's when you still can improve your social skills, your psychological skills. It's an area where you can improve your ability to manage negotiations and to manage something done. So it's a good point actually about negotiation, but the case where it can't work, when there is no team spirit and actually people are not open to any agreements, for example. And this is bad case where I would just give up. Other than that, I guess I just grow learning to manage situations.
Doesn't look there will be a case where you would give up. Instead, you will find out the way.
I don't know. Maybe if I will give up, will mean that I didn't grow enough.
Didn't grow enough?
Yes.
All right.
So the goal, not to give up.
Yeah. So pair programming with someone will help not to give up, especially during remote work. All right. Do we have any additional questions here?
No questions so far, and it's 1 minute till the end. So thank you guys very much, and thank you all our guests for joining us. I just dropped a link to the feedback form if you feel like answering some questions, please do, because that's our first webinar and we decided not to use slides. I think it went okay and nice. If you like it or if you have some comments, please leave them. And I guess we'll keep going this way and we'll send more invitation to our others events. So please join and have a nice day, evening, morning today. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks. Nastya, so
Thank
there's
you.
a comment that your link requires permission.
Google
form.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I will open it. Okay, thank you.
Let me know if you need some pair programming to manage the done.
Yes, sure. Yes, sure. I think with your help, I'll do it much faster.